Former President Jacob Zuma would always say, "Amandla semasebeni," which is the powers and the branches.
But even if Ramaphosa is president, that gap between December 2022 and whatever happens up until 2024 is going to be marked by pala situations.
The ANC will never be united.
What do you think is going on with President Mbeki?
President Thabo Mbeki is a different animal.
Talk us through some of the dynamics that are happening within the Ramaphosa camp. Take it away. Spread the fire. Welcome back to SMWX, and today I'm very glad to be joined by senior journalist Lizeka Tandwa of the Mail&Guardian. Lizeka, thanks so much for joining us on SMWX.
Thank you for having me.
I think you're the person who probably knows most about this ANC conference, apart from Paul Mashatile. So, thanks so much for joining us, and shout out for the great journalistic work that you do.
Thank you for that accolade.
It's great to have you, and we have this big ANC conference coming up. You've been following this very closely. What do you think makes this conference different from other ANC conferences?
Well, I think I've said that to you, that I'm a toddler in this game. This is my second conference. I was at Nasrec, which was my first. I observed Mangaung from afar as a young journalist. But looking at this conference, I would say the ANC is at a point of no return, in that the ANC needs to prove itself. It needs to prove whether it's renewed or not. It needs to prove whether it can stick by its resolution to fight corruption, and this will be the litmus test for the ANC. There's various things or various subjects that will come out of this conference, which have been transversed before, but I don't think as in the greater magnitude as this conference. We will see in this conference, for instance, the step aside rule that will come into the glare of the delegates. Well, they'll have to decide whether they want to continue with this rule or resolution of the ANC. And what does that mean for us as South Africans, as citizens, as people who are observing what the ANC does in this conference, will trickle down to the decisions that we make in the 2024 national elections.
Yeah, absolutely. And what do you think some of the implications of this conference are on 2024? Because we're all kind of looking at December, but of course December rolls on basically into a new election season. So take us through how this might impact that big election. I think
that's what, if you look at the Cyril Ramaphosa faction, his core caucus, they've been riding on this on this train that Ramaphosa is the only person who can help the ANC win the national government elections in 2024. So it signals to you how important it is for them to have Ramaphosa, or how important it is for Ramaphosa to emerge in this conference for the ANC. At this point, Ramaphosa with Pala, he doesn't seem all too great. With the repercussions of Pala, it doesn't look too well with him, which is why people like Mkize have found some sort of space to come in and even critique Ramaphosa in terms of how he's handled corrupt leaders of the ANC. So I think it's a pivotal moment for President Ramaphosa, and equally for the ANC as well, in terms of how they choose the next crop of NEC members, because it's not only the top six, but the NEC members who will come into that room and make decisions will also be something that we as South Africans are looking at. There are so many characters within the ANC which have stains in terms of their names and have been implicated in reports and inquiries such as the state capture inquiry. So how the ANC handles that, how the ANC handles state capture in this conference, resolutions that come out of it, whether they agree and adopt the recommendations of Justice Zondo, will impact our decision when we get into those ballot boxes in 2024.
Very true, and let's look at the Ramaphosa grouping, as you say, because you've been writing interesting articles about how we shouldn't necessarily see that as just one group, but in fact there are fractures within the different groupings. Talk us through some of the dynamics that are happening within the Ramaphosa camp. Take it away.
So the Ramaphosa faction, or the Ramaphosa caucus, they call themselves, it came out of the 2017 Nasrec Conference, united, formidable, consolidated itself in the NEC as well as the National Working Committee, and we saw that the RET, the so-called RET, which was the Radical Economic Transformation grouping, which was centered around former President Jacob Zuma as well as the suspended Secretary General Ace Magashule, kind of limping when it comes to the NEC. Never had we seen before a president who will close NEC meetings and address publicly the country in terms of what decisions had been laid or made in that NEC, and it was all to solidify the Ramaphosa faction, and they did that very well. But coming into this conference, there are certain figures like Paul Mashatile, for instance, who has not really been in the core of the Ramaphosa faction, but is a stream within the faction, because as much as he is not an invited guest in the room, but he wants to be in the room because he realizes, much like many, that they still, that Ramaphosa still has some sort of what would I say? Ramaphosa is still someone who is appreciated by South Africans in terms of the middle class, the well-to-do, as well as the poorest people. So he realizes that. So he's got his own stream, which is within the stream of the factions of Cyril Ramaphosa. Then we've got people who we've termed as the Krisani Cabal, who are the Gwede Mantashes, the Enoch Godongwanes of the world, and up until recently I would have said Mondli Gugubele was part of that cohort, and so they have their own ambitions within the Cyril Ramaphosa faction. Bear in mind, everyone has their own self-interests in this faction, within this faction within factions. And then we have what they call the doctors and the ministers. The doctors, Dr. Aaron Motsoaledi, Dr. Patla, who's now the Minister of Health, and we've got the Pravin Gordhan, the Enterprise Minister, as well as Derek Hanekom, who's now the advisor to the president in tourism. So that's another stream, but there are also streams within that stream. So it's complicated when you're looking at the Ramaphosa faction, which is why they haven't been able to really consolidate a slate, and they've been a tug of war in terms of who exactly must be surrounding Cyril Ramaphosa when it comes to the top six. So it kind of gives you an idea that even though perception says that the Ramaphosa faction is united, it very much isn't.
That's fascinating, because I know all the names, but it's hard to see who stands where exactly. And the three streams you've pointed out is a nice way of understanding those dynamics. And we've heard, and you've reported on different kinds of slates. So first, Mashatile was thought of as the obvious deputy candidate, but he's also then been mentioned in other slates associated with Mkize. And so I'm interested in Mashatile's role and his centrality in the party, and how you think you can help us understand where Mashatile might be and how important he might be in December, because it's hard to pin down exactly what's going on with Mashatile.
I think if not, I would say at this point he is more important than the president when it comes to the ANC.
Wow.
when you look at Paul Mashatile, he's sort of an accident of history because he got into a position as the acting Secretary General, acting DSG. He's got his position as a Treasurer General by sheer accident, by mere accident, because of the suspension of Ace Magashule and the untimely demise or passing of Jesse Duarte. That kind of, him now. In that space, him taking that space of the Secretary General opened doors for him in terms of provinces, because that is where the power, when it comes to the elective conference, that's where it lies. Provinces have an understanding of the regions have an understanding of the branches, so it all trickles down. And he has that power to decide whether a branch can go to conference or not. He has that power to decide whether a province can go to conference and not. And people have aligned with him, I think, to a certain extent on that basis. Paul, if you're looking at Paul Mashatile and you're looking at President Ramaphosa, yes, President Ramaphosa has received endorsements from provinces, and he's received endorsements from regions and the likes. But when you're looking at Paul in terms of how much power he's amassed in such a short time, and given that the president at this point is sitting with a situation where he might be facing an impeachment, Paul now becomes a very, very powerful and a big player. And everyone around him knows that even if President Ramaphosa wins this conference, there's a possibility, and a huge possibility, that President Cyril Ramaphosa might not make it to 2024 if this Phala Phala scandal continues to go as it is now. And who becomes the president of the ANC? It's Paul Mashatile. At this point, it doesn't look like anyone else has the backing that Paul has in terms of the deputy president, the people who've raised their hands for deputy president. Senzo Mchunu is a latecomer. He's hoping to convince some regions in the KZN. I'm not too sure. It's a little too late for him, I think, but we'll see. There is Ronald Lamola. He's managed to convince some pockets of Mpumalanga that he is the right man for the job, and the PEC went along with him, but some people are not convinced. There's still a group which is still loyal to the current deputy president, Didi Mabuza. And then you've got Oscar Mabuyane in the Eastern Cape, who also has ambitions to ascend to deputy presidency, but he's also got a very fractured province. Yes, it's a very big, powerful province, but it's fractured. There's a grouping which is somewhat, in some way or another, still linked to Paul Mashatile and still linked to Zweli Mkhize, and that's a grouping that lost the conference to Oscar Mabuyane, and it's led by Babalo Matikizela. So you can see that all those individuals, including Zweli Mkhize, who has the backing of KZN, but at the same time, who else is backing him outside of KZN? He needs to work the ground. But all of those people don't amass the same kind of support as Paul does. Paul has there's about 5 provinces which have already signified that they're going with him, and it's to a certain degree, it's advantageous for you to go with Paul. He is sitting at the Secretary General's office, and he is the decider. He decides who goes and who doesn't.
That's so fascinating, because I had not thought. I think a lot of the debate is who's going to be president. But even if Ramaphosa is president, that gap between December 2022 and whatever happens up until 2024 is going to be marked by Phala Phala situations. And the deputy president of the ANC could very well be... it's a lovely... And then you just wait, right?
Sit and wait.
And so maybe the smart move for anyone is to say, well, let me go sit in the deputy presidency for a while, and when Ramaphosa, is in more and more hot water, I come forward. I had not thought about that. So Mashatile, could be president of the country next year. if he's deputy now?
He could be. He could be. I think from where I'm sitting, I actually think that he could be the president of the ANC if he wanted to at this point.
Now?
Yes, at this point. If he'd raise his hand to ascend to that position. And I think the problem with Ramaphosa, yes, the issue around Phala Phala has dented him immensely in the ANC. Yeah. And even to the people, to those who were sitting on the fence, they have now shown to be critical. And there's a rebellion that's starting to come out within the Cyril Ramaphosa faction, so which kind of gives you an understanding that he doesn't have as much authority as we would think that he has within his own faction.
So Mashatile
for me is the one to watch.
What if? So there's a possibility, actually, I think, from what I'm hearing, is that if he actually wanted to challenge,
if he did,
at the 11th hour. Oh my goodness.
I don't think it's going to happen.
Yeah, okay. You're going to have a nice December.
I think it's going to happen. Lord help us. But I do think that from where I'm standing now, if he did want to, he would have a very good chance of beating Cyril. Better chance than Zweli Mkhize, a better chance than Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma. He really has been the underdog, and no one has seen him coming, and he's here now, and no one knows how to manage him. Even the Cyril faction don't know how to manage Paul, and Paul has considerable support in Limpopo, big provinces, Limpopo, KZN, Eastern Cape. He's got pockets there. He's got Northwest. You're looking at Mpumalanga. There are certain pockets of Mpumalanga which do favor Paul. So, the man to watch.
Absolutely. And you've spoken about Zweli Mkhize, and that seems to be the biggest challenger to Ramaphosa, without, considering what you've said, which is, but that campaign, I mean, firstly, even within KZN, it hasn't been able to unite fully the province and the main players and speakers there. What are you seeing in terms of the Mkhize campaign, and what should we be looking out for in terms of that campaign?
Well, he did something that he didn't do in 2017. He went back to the ground. He realized what former President Jacob Zuma would always say, amandla semasebeni, which is the powers and the branches. And he went back after his resignation, I call it an axing, and went back to KZN. He consolidated KZN. He saw that the KZN was fractured, and he knew that in order for him to make a comeback, he needed to ensure that he had a solid KZN, and he didn't do that in 2017. In fact, he didn't have support in the KZN in 2017. Yes, he had pockets there and there, and he had pockets in the Eastern Cape, but he really didn't solidify himself as a formidable player. It was different now. He went back to the KZN. There were regions in the KZN which were going into conference. In fact, most of the regions in the KZN were due to go to conference. And he made sure that all the players who would ascend to as regional chairs, regional secretaries, were people that he were loyal to him, people who were sympathetic to his cause, and he did that very well. I think as journalists, we didn't see the so-called Taliban, that grouping that won the KZN conference. We didn't see them coming. We were busy talking about Nomsa Ncube-Dube, who's the premier now. We were busy talking about Sihle and Zikalala and Dumiseni Ntuli. No one saw those guys coming. And he did that very well. But in terms of now moving forward and moving away from the KZN, that's proven to be difficult for him and his people. This provincial secretary, Bheki Mtolo, who is very loyal to Zweli. You hear just in his speak how he defends Zweli Mkhize, even with the Digital Vibes saga. He's very loyal to the man. But the issue around Zweli, and from where I'm sitting, is that he's a man who has to contend with the incumbent. That's very difficult. But also there's that Paul factor. Paul has solidified and consolidated himself in all the provinces. So he is not he is not considered by some as an alternative. Even with the RET, I don't believe that there's an RET. I believe that disintegrated a long time ago. But even those, even that corner doesn't seem to be fully convinced, which is why there has been all of a sudden an NDZ come back, because there is no belief that Zweli Mkhize is the right man for the job. And he, unfortunately, has to come into a time where the elections, in terms of the ANC, how they've changed. They've been electoral reform under former President Mangaladzi, and that has kind of crippled him in terms of how he's going to go to provinces and negotiate. Also, money plays a very important role. If you look at a lot of these campaigns, especially you look at the SG's campaign, what we saw in 2017, people crisscrossing the country, it's not happening now because no one has the money. No one has the money. The only people who might be able to have that platform are people who are still in government, ministers. Lindiwe Sisulu, she'll use her platform. The president will use his platform to kind of, there's that Lizima campaign now, and he's using that to, which is, that's the advantage of being the incumbent. But in terms of Zweli Mkhize, it will be interesting to see. I would be very surprised if he manages to get the support of other provinces, other powerful provinces, your Eastern Cape, your Limpopo, and Gauteng, to buy what he's selling. I'm not too sure if that can happen. And everyone, I think, is mindful that there's still 2024, which is knocking. And whoever comes into that position must be someone who can explain himself, and must be someone who can have that moral high ground. And Zweli, to a very wide degree, I think, has lost his credibility. As much as he was seen to be, he had his heydays during the harsh lockdown in terms of his response to COVID-19. I think that slowly washed away with the digital vibes matter, and he hasn't been able to answer the digital vibes matter.
The final thing I want to come to is the way former presidents seemingly in one moment have all come out. So let's put Zuma aside, because I think we all know why Zuma is saying what he's saying. Let's put Motlanthe aside. What fascinates me is former President Mbeki. And it seemed to me that he focused on Phala Phala, and he wouldn't just do that for no reason. It's not the first time he's done it. And he does ask quite an interesting question, which is, with the step aside, okay, it's about being charged, but then what if 3 independent judges say there's a prima facie case? What do you think is going on with President Mbeki? And do you think that signals anything about President Ramaphosa's position at the moment?
Yes. President Mbeki, I think, came in wanting two things. He saw that the ANC was disintegrating. He saw that the ANC was losing the essence of what it was. It was moving away from its core values, and he wanted to come back and kind of be the man to realign the ANC to what it was. And I think also he needed to rebrand his own legacy. I think that was part and parcel of what he wanted to do, and it just so happened that it was at a point where Cyril Ramaphosa does not operate much like Jacob Zuma. I don't think that Cyril Ramaphosa would have closed the door on him, and he knew that he had someone who was amenable. And also the ANC kind of needed to show at that particular time, if you remember when President Thabo Mbeki started appearing at NEC meetings, was right before the 2019 elections. So they needed to show that, they had ushered in a new dawn where there would be some sort of cooperation between the incumbent as well as former leaders, and the ANC had reached this era where it no longer, the Zuma years were gone, were way behind them, and it was advantageous for both at that point. Both were using each other for their own interests, the ANC, the current NEC, as well as the former President Thabo Mbeki. Where I don't think the current president and his allies didn't see was that Mbeki would come back and be the Mbeki that they knew from before. And no nonsense man who will speak his mind and doesn't care about channels, much like Kgalema. Kgalema kind of keeps to his lane. He's been asked to help them in terms of the electoral process. He's done that. He's been asked to help in terms of the land expropriation bill. He's done that. He's been asked to help in terms of the step-aside guidelines. He did that, and he kept to his lane. President Thabo Mbeki is a different animal, and there's also that relationship, that clash between President Cyril Ramaphosa and President Mbeki, and there were leaks of NEC meetings and Top 6 meetings where President Cyril Ramaphosa was actually speaking to that relationship, that animosity or acrimony between the two of them. And I'm not sure what they expected. I think maybe they expected him to be an elder and to keep to that position, but history has taught you that that's not the man. What disappoints me about the former president is that when it comes to his criticism, yes, he's got every right to criticize. He is a South African citizen, and he is an ANC member, and he does want to see the country moving forward. But when it comes to his criticism, what one would like is for former leaders to kind of open and pave the way for the next generation. And I don't think that he's done that as much as I would like. We have seen provincial leaders going to the former president, speaking to him, but what fruits has that borne? I'm not too sure. I do think that it is for him twofold. I do think that he cares about the ANC. He's a man who was brought up in the ANC. He knows nothing but the ANC. But I think it is self-serving as well. We can't run away from that. It's very self-serving on his part. He does have an axe to grind with Cyril Ramaphosa. He is a man who does still harbor some resentment. And you hear that even when he's speaking, that there are certain things where they don't see eye to eye, where maybe he could have just gone to Cyril and spoken to him in person instead of magnifying and publicizing that he has concerns about Cyril's government.
So we're supposed to end, but now you just keep saying fascinating things that I want to delve into. Can I end on this? And then I promise this is the last question. Fallout after December. Maybe just give us a sense of maybe the one or two things that could actually happen after December that we may not have an eye on.
Well, if you look at what's going on with provinces, I think we will see some purging. I think we will see some provinces being disbanded. I think we will see a split of the Cyril Ramaphosa faction widening. And then you look at what's going to happen in terms of if Cyril Ramaphosa comes back, he will have to. It's now or never for him to ensure that he cements his legacy by holding everyone accountable who was responsible for corruption and the hallowing of state resources and state machinery institutions. So for him, that is his goal. coming into the next elections. We also want to see that before the elections, before 2024, and how that will affect the ANC. The soul of the ANC or the architecture of the ANC as it currently stands, I think will be very interesting. We will see, I foresee that there will be, if Cyril doesn't come out of this alive, we might see a splinter. It always happens. And I think that when you're looking at the provinces in terms of how they have been, you look at Bheki Mtolo, for instance, how he's been so vocal and he has either criticized the NEC or been vocal about the standing of KwaZulu-Natal. We look at Oscar Mabuyane, his relationship with Paul Mashatile has been very, very tense, and he has a province which is facing a legal challenge, which might not even get to conference if that legal challenge succeeds. So there's going to be that situation. Nomvula Mokonyane comes into play. She's a formidable woman. She'll also want to make sure that she stamps her authority in that position. So it's going to be interesting to see how those individuals, if they come together, and how they unite as the top six. And I don't think that's possible. Nomvula Mokonyane, Paul Mashatile, Cyril Ramaphosa, Phumulo Masale Mdu or Mdumiseni Nduli, I don't see them having a meeting of the minds. Yes, it's politics, but I don't see them having a meeting of the minds where the ANC comes out unified. I do see that there will be a lot of dissenting voices, and a lot of issues that come out of December. The ANC will never be united. I don't see that happening.
Well, Lizeka, thank you so much for sharing your considerable insights with us, and so glad that we could have you on SMWX.
Thank you so much for having me.
Viewers, I tried very hard to get this interview, and Lizeka finally agreed, so please show your love in the comments down below.
Okay.
Aye.